everybody. Welcome to Walk Into a Bar, the show where three brothers who happen to be professionals get together on Zoom and chat across the country. My name's Phil. I'm a lawyer. Middle brother is Matt. He is an engineer. And Ben is the goofy-looking one who is a pastor. We live in three diverse and different states. I'm in South Dakota. Matt is in Arizona, and Ben is in Illinois. Oh, yeah, we can all go, oh, for Ben. Sorry, Ben. But we like to get together and chat every now and then. We apologize. We missed a week. I think it was just a week we missed. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Ben says.
Yep.
We missed those weeks because Matt was undergoing some treatment. As he said before on this, he's fighting cancer right now. He had to go do a little bit of chemo, and, of course, that knocked him out. And so we took a couple weeks off. We're back for a week, and we're going to talk about some pretty heady things here and get into some things that are going on. We're recording this on the 4th of July, 2020, which means a couple of things have transpired. The first thing that transpired was Ben had a birthday on July 1st.
Hey, we really don't want to broadcast that. I mean,
I'm 26.
Yeah, whatever. Still younger than me, so
I'm
don't.
36. I'm getting old.
36 and still ugly.
Yeah,
Still
if
ugly.
ugly's good looking, then count me in.
No.
'Cause I am good looking.
No.
Hi,
Terrible.
ladies. I'm married.
Surprised the camera hasn't broken yet. The other thing that went on, we do want to talk about a little bit is, like I said, I'm from South Dakota. Last night, President Trump came to South Dakota and went to Mount Rushmore, and there was a little bit of a rally, I guess you could say. It's not really a political rally. He didn't come as a candidate for president. He came as the president of the United States and celebrated the 4th of July a day early here in South Dakota with fireworks at Mount Rushmore. And it was the first time in a decade that we've had fireworks at Mount Rushmore. The Black Hills have had a problem with Asian pine beetle, I think it's called, killing a lot of the trees, and there's been a lot of dead trees and stuff like that for the past decade or so. It's kind of cleared up now. So there's a little bit of a concern about fire for the past 10 years, but like I said, it's kind of cleared up, and National Park Service was okay with it, I guess, and they went and had fireworks last night at Mount Rushmore. I watched the whole thing. I watched a lot of the lead up to it. We're gonna get into that for a bit, but maybe we should just kind of talk about general impressions. My brothers have all watched a little bit of it or a lot of it, and so why don't we go ahead and talk about some general impressions? Who wants to start? Matt, do you want to start?
sure, I can start. My first thoughts were Kristi Noem spoke very well, and I'm impressed. All of the stuff that I've heard about Kristi Noem since I left the great state of South Dakota to pursue my career it has not been very flattering, and that's the first little bit that I've sat and listened to her. I was very impressed, and I was also impressed and encouraged with President Trump's statements and his speech, and I wish that the rest of the country as a whole would understand where he's coming from and what he's really saying, and understand the treacherous path that we are currently walking down.
For those who don't know, Kristi Noem is the governor of the state of South Dakota.
I can barely hear you, Phil.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to speak louder?
Can you move the mic closer?
I can move the mic a little bit
Let's
closer.
do that.
So
I don't want everybody out there in internet world going, what's he saying? Oh, my ears! Matt spoke. So
that would not be good.
I appreciate it.
I'm sorry, I have such a dominating voice.
No, your mic's coming through clear, Matt. It's Phil's fault.
I attribute it to the many classes of speech that I had to take at the great South Dakota State University. And
horrible.
Go Jackalopes.
State sucks. Oh.
Go Jackalopes.
Maybe I've got the Rona or something.
Oh, no.
Go Yotes!
Well, you do live in South Dakota where they spread it last night, so
I guess.
I'm just kidding.
Okay. Well, Ben, do you want to talk a little bit
Yeah.
about what you saw?
I saw more of the great part of Kristi Noem. Really, I mean, when she gets in front of a camera, when she speaks, I think she does a phenomenal job. I think it was a very well put together event. I think President Trump again focused on the great history that our country has and was founded on, and even some current events of just like promoting some more current heroes in our country. I think he did a phenomenal job with this speech, and man, I'm glad that we live in a time where he's the president right now. And you know, there are a lot of things I don't like about him, but I feel like he's doing a great job navigating our country right now, and that's got to be a hard job.
Yeah, for sure. I moved my microphone. Does that sound a little better for you guys?
A lot better, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So I just want to echo kind of what my brothers have said. Before coronavirus hit, there were some missteps by the Noem administration. There were some things that really weren't appreciated. And if you look at some of the historical polls that were taken regarding her governorship before coronavirus, she didn't have a very high approval rating. It was my prediction at the time that she would be primaried, and there would have been a fairly high probability, should the right candidate have primaried her at that time, that she would have lost. Since coronavirus hit, it's been 180 degrees, completely different. She's done an amazing job keeping our state safe by not imposing draconian restrictions that some other states, Illinois, have seen necessary to impose. And we continue to see, despite the fact that the state has quote unquote opened up more, we never really were shut down. We've continued to see a decrease in cases. We're at about 800 active cases in the state right now. So she's done a great job so far. I remember watching, I think it was the signing of the Farm Bill, I can't remember which, in D.C., where Kristi was able to come in and speak a little bit. And President Trump, when he got up to do his announcement, said, he pointed her out in the crowd and said, and we're going to do fireworks at Mount Rushmore this year, and I'm going to be there. And I remember thinking, I don't know. They haven't done fireworks for a decade. I don't know if that's going to happen. But he did it. He pushed it through. There have been naysayers in every corner. The media, everyone who is not in the conservative camp has poo-pooed it. Oh, it's awful. It's going to be risky. Oh, my goodness, what are they thinking? They're just a bunch of morons. There was no fire that happened last night. If the National Park Service approves a fireworks plan, don't you think they're going to take those things into account? And they did approve the fireworks plan. The Secretary of the Interior was on that list. They had fireworks experts looking at the plan. They had the people in the Department of Interior who maintain the safety of these areas look at the plan. They approved it. The fire marshals approved it. Everybody approved it. So the fact that people continued harping even up to yesterday about this is going to be awful, it's going to be a tragedy, what are they thinking? It really kind of bugs me, because there's a lot of smart people who looked at this, and frankly, they wouldn't have let it happen if it would have been dangerous. It hasn't been a super wet year in South Dakota, but we've had a couple of super wet years in a row. The fire risk is way down this year versus the years where we didn't have fireworks at Mount Rushmore, the beginning of that decade. Those were really dry years. It's been fairly wet over the past couple of years. So there's really, and there's always risk with fireworks, right? There's always risks with fireworks in a forest, but you can mitigate those risks, and that's what they did. So I wanted to talk about that. I want to talk about the speeches. CNN's headline this morning really caught me. I watched all of the coverage I could watch, including some of the things that were happening beforehand that I'll talk about in a little bit. And I promised my brothers I wouldn't get on my soapbox. I'm going to try not to.
No, I want you to. Come on, soapbox.
The CNN headline that popped up on my phone 2 hours ago: Trump's culture war bonfire analysis. In a jaw-dropping speech in front of Mount Rushmore, the president stoked fear of culture change while minimizing the dangers of the pandemic. I did not see or hear anything about minimizing the fears of the pandemic in this speech. I don't know where they're getting that. Maybe I missed it in the speech. It's entirely possible. And then they call it a jaw-dropping speech where the president stoked fear of culture change. I take exception to that. I watched the speech, and what I heard, by and large, there were things I didn't agree with in the speech, but what I heard, by and large, was President Trump talking about the great things that the men who are on Mount Rushmore have done for our country, the great things that other great Americans of all cultures and races have done for our country. And it really irritates me when I hear people looking at historical figures and concentrating on the bad things and ignoring the good things.
And that was mentioned. Trump mentioned that. He did.
We're all Christians. We all understand that every person, and this is a main tenet of our faith, every person is sinful. Mm-hmm. Every person is bad. And we believe that people cannot do good except through Christ and through God's will, whether they're a good person or not. We look at examples in the Bible like King Nebuchadnezzar, who wasn't a believer in God Almighty, right, but God used. We look at people like Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate has been vilified over the years, but if Pontius Pilate hadn't been in the position he was in when Christ was being run through the Jewish monkey court system, then we don't know if the execution would have taken place. And people want to say, oh, well, that's a good thing if it wouldn't. No, that's part of God's plan. And God sometimes puts people in charge who are bad people, but he does that for a reason. So when we look at history through a single solitary lens, was this person a racist? We discount all of the good that person may have done. We discount all of the good things that have happened because of the good that person did. People want to discount George Washington because he held slaves. Well, what percentage of the population during the late 1700s and early 1800s in our country held slaves? Looking at history through a revisionist lens like that is dangerous. It's very dangerous because it ignores things that we need to think about and things we need to learn about. Now, do we acknowledge the bad things? Yes, we have to acknowledge the bad things. But we cannot focus on the bad things and ignore the good. It's just as bad to focus on the bad and ignore the good as it is to focus on the good and ignore the bad. You have to find middle ground there. You have to. So I take umbrage with CNN's headline, and I've seen similar headlines from other mainstream, I guess you want to say, media sources this morning that don't reflect what I saw in the speech last night. I said there were things that Trump said that I didn't agree with. He said that Mount Rushmore would be eternal and will last forever. As a Christian, I don't believe that's the case. I believe that it is temporal, just like the rest of the world, and that at some stage, something's going to happen. If you read the Bible and you look at end times prophecy, there's not a whole lot of mention of America there. It could be read in a couple of places, but I don't think there's going to be a huge American presence on the good side anyway at the end times.
A little known fact about Mount Rushmore, getting off this topic, kind of moving on a little bit so Phil doesn't get too much on a soapbox.
Oh, dude.
Mount Rushmore is not completed.
No.
And it never will be.
It was.
No, it won't be.
I have a picture, and what reminded me of this is I have a picture of Abraham Lincoln, the face of Mount Rushmore, Abraham Lincoln. being worked on, and I have it because every time I look at it, every time I write a message, every time I'm working, and this is a great analogy, and I think this is another reason why we need to keep Mount Rushmore and never place our hands on it as humans, is because it's a reminder that we as a country and us as individuals are always going to be a work in progress, that we are not perfect, and
That's
we never
true.
will be,
Yep.
and that we are not completed until the Lord says it. So,
Yep, that's exactly right. Getting back to the thing last night, I mean, that's a really good point, Ben.
I know.
Getting back to the 4th of July celebration last night, Kristi Noem did an amazing job with her speech. I thought her speech actually was better than President Trump's. She did a great job focusing on some of the issues and talking about her position on the issues. And it's just, I worked for her opposition in the primary, so it kind of hurts to say this a little bit, but I'm glad she's our governor. So the other thing I want to talk about is there were protests last night. South Dakota, U.S. Highway 16 is the highway that goes from Rapid City into Keystone, South Dakota, the town closest to Mount Rushmore, and then up to Mount Rushmore. I think it may be 16A or something like that. But it is a U.S. highway.
Keep going, I'll be right.
And they, the government had a checkpoint set up on that highway for people who had tickets to present their tickets and be let in, and people who didn't have tickets were turned away there. And that's fine, because there's really nothing beyond that checkpoint that isn't Mount Rushmore. You're past the city of Keystone. You can't get to anything except Mount Rushmore going that way.
That's not true. You can get into the Black Hills more.
But there are other ways to get there besides this particular route.
There are many other ways that have equally good views.
Yes. Except not of Mount Rushmore. Some protesters, clearly in an event that was clearly planned, well thought out, and strategically organized. In 3 or 4 big 15-passenger conversion vans showed up. They drove their vans across the highway, blocking the highway, got out and sabotaged their vehicles by either slashing tires or removing wheels and throwing away parts of the jack that were necessary to jack up the vehicle, and then proceeded to begin protesting. They did this right at the checkpoint. There is a news organization, a conservative news organization called Right Side Broadcasting or something like that. They were actually the first vehicle in line. They have video up of this starting. I haven't watched. I need to watch it. But the protests began, and there was about 2 hours of protests, 2.5 hours of protests at that site. My understanding is it kept some people who had tickets to the event. There were 7,500 tickets handed out for this event. And I say handed out, they weren't sold, they were handed out for free. 125,000 applications, 7,500 tickets handed out. And there were people who did not make it to the event because they had a hard cutoff of 6 p.m. local time for people who were ticket holders to get in, and the protests lasted beyond that. South Dakota National Guard, Pennington County Sheriff's Office, Rapid City Police Department, and a few other agencies showed up. The assembly was determined to be an unlawful assembly because it was blocking a U.S. highway. The troops and law enforcement officers showed up, and I watched all of this. There were Facebook live feeds from several different organizations. The Rapid City Journal, this other Right Side Broadcasting or whatever it was called, had live broadcasts there. The reporters were right there in the lines with cops. They were right there in with the protesters. I love modern technology because you can see everything going on. The protesters, besides the fact that they showed up and blocked the highway illegally, and I want to be clear, that was illegal. They did a fantastic job of keeping the protest peaceful. There were a few people who were antagonists and trying to get in trouble, and they were arrested and pulled out. The protesters did not accept their presence, and the protesters did a good job of keeping it peaceful. And I appreciate that. I don't appreciate the fact that they used an illegal means to do it, but they kept it peaceful. Law enforcement officers did a great job. I saw a headline today saying I think it was ACLU or somebody saying that there were improper police techniques used. I didn't see any of that. I didn't see anything improper. Not a living thing. There was our friend Terry, who's been on this podcast, said that one of the news outlets in the state, I don't know which one, had mentioned that tear gas was being used. And tear gas was not used. There was a threat of tear gas. Some of the law enforcement officers told reporters, hey, it may get stinky here. You might want to move back. But they never actually had to deploy the tear gas because the protesters kept it calm. They dispersed relatively quickly.
He lit up their Facebook page.
My friend Terry lit up their Facebook page because he was watching it live, and they clearly, I was watching another local news establishment during the day, and they clearly were not paying attention to the live feeds on Facebook because their reporting didn't have anything like what was actually happening. I did see, we discussed this earlier, I did see what we believe were pepper balls, which is basically a paintball filled with pepper spray, being deployed in front of the feet of some protesters who were getting a little uppity. But it was very clear, not at them. It was very clear that those things were deployed at their feet, not at their feet, but in front of their feet in an effort to say that that's far enough. My understanding is that to begin with, there were about 200 protesters at the beginning. And by the time National Guard and everybody had moved in and brought in wreckers to clear the vans out, there were only about 10 or 15 protesters left. Most of those protesters dispersed and left after getting their point across. And they did a great job of getting their point across. I was actually, I was pretty impressed with the protesters. Like I said, except for the illegal blocking of the highway, which, you know what? If you're going to take that tactic, you got to be prepared for the consequences. And there will be consequences. There will be prosecutions for things like this, I'm sure. I'm not involved in any way with the prosecutions for this. This is not something that is within my wheelhouse, but I'm 90% sure there will be prosecutions for some of these things. So I guess what I'm trying to say is protesters, good job keeping it peaceful. Law enforcement, National Guard, good job in keeping things under control and doing a good job. Just good job all around, I guess. Yep. We have the right in this country to peaceably assemble. We have the right to air our grievances. We have the right to protest. And if there comes a time where I feel the need to protest about it, I want the right to do that. But at the same time, those things have to be kept somewhat reasonable, because my rights stop at your face, so to speak. That's the old saying, you know. I can swing my fist all I want, but the minute I hit somebody with it, my rights have stopped. Mm-hmm. So that's all I really want to say about what happened last night. The fireworks were spectacular. I thought the presentation of everything that went on during the event, there was a lot before Trump got there. There were some speeches by some reenactors dressed up like some of the presidents. Those were really good. There were some speeches and some cultural events by Native Americans, and their message came out very clear during those speeches at Mount Rushmore. This is our land, not yours. We think you stole it from us. This is sacred ground to us. They were able to say that all very clearly to the crowd of people who were there. And I thought really that wasn't covered by media, unfortunately, but it was on the live feed, and just well done by everybody. Okay.
Cool.
I think we beat that horse enough. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Anything else you guys want to say before we move on?
I think we need to stop talking about dead horses. So,
what's your fascination with dead horses and beating them, Phil?
I'm kind of upset about that.
I don't know.
I am hurt at your statement.
I live in ranch country.
Not cool. Horses have feelings too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're important.
Is that all you're saying? Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Anyway.
We'll move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
And my brothers wanted to talk about purchasing Pew Pews.
Why? Because I've had a bad experience this weekend with somebody. Somebody, I was trying to buy a handgun, and the the sales rep did not want me to buy one. And he hid behind his badge, so to speak. And it was really kind of sad. It was really sad. But it is what it is. And so I want to talk about proper techniques. I want to have argument discussion about it. What do we need before we buy a gun? I think yesterday I went shooting. Pew Pew. Sorry, my bad. We're not monetized that way. I went out and I shot a couple guns, and I familiarized myself again with the gun, and I feel very comfortable with a firearm. So I've had hunter safety. That's huge.
Well, and you have a lot of experience with shooting because we grew up in a family that shot.
Yeah, I have quite a bit of experience shooting. I hadn't shot in a while, so I went out and shot yesterday. And part of owning a gun, I think, is experiencing the gun. And if I can't buy one, will I ever get that experience? You have to know people. That's the other thing. You have to know people that have guns and are willing to teach you to get you to that point. And I highly recommend taking a hunter safety course. Why? Because if you end up in a survival mode, that's a good way to learn how to hunt and hunt securely and safely. So, but with that being said, I'm looking at a couple 9mm, one for myself, one for my wife. I'm looking for one for me first. I'm looking at either a Security 9. Something just went off, but I'm looking for a Security 9, not compact.
4th of July.
Yeah, hey, welcome to 4th of July. Not a compact. I want something a little bit bigger. I'm 6'5", so small guns look small in my hand.
Just an inch.
So, no, Matt's 6'6".
Oh.
So
I remember our basketball stats were a little different.
Yeah, basketball stats. I'm 6'7".
Really? I'm
6'4". I was 6'4" either way. So
I was 6'4" and 3/4 in real life, and I was always 6'5" basketball stats. So anyway, I'm looking at a couple 9mm guns, and they're not expensive. They're about $230 to $400. I think that's about right. And I was looking that day that I was shopping. I was looking at a Walter. What the sales rep said was a Walter PP9. It's a Walter PPS. It had no 9. It was a 9mm Walter PPS. It is not the official PP9. That one is way more expensive. Thank you, James Bond.
And PP stands for Pew Pew, obviously.
Pew Pew.
Yeah.
Pew Pew 9. But my experience buying the gun was this guy kept on telling us we need classes. And essentially when I was like, okay, well, I'm thinking about, I like the way this gun feels in my hand.
Did he refuse to sell it to you because of that?
Because we wouldn't take classes?
Or did he? Yeah.
He kept on. He didn't refuse to sell it to me. He kept on going, man, you should really and it just became unattractive to buy.
Okay.
And besides that, I don't think I was going to be happy with that gun anyway, because it wasn't the gun I was looking for.
Right. Because what you really want is a 45.
I don't want a 45. I don't like how they feel. I don't like how they shoot. I shot a Colt 45 the other day, yesterday.
1911 or a Colt 45 revolver?
Revolver.
Okay.
They are so hard to aim. And it's not the aiming, it's the shooting. And the 45, I'm not very good with revolvers, period. I'd rather have a semi-auto just because they shoot different. And, I just didn't have very much luck. I had more luck with a slug and a shotgun or birdshot than I did with anything else. But I'm also out of practice. And so getting a gun in a safe place, practicing in a safe place, in a safe manner, with hearing protection and eye protection and whatever else they require, is a very big need when purchasing a gun and when looking at what you're going to do with that gun.
Sure.
So, but I had a bad experience. And I have to go to Bass Pro because I have $75 in gift cards to Bass Pro, and I just see that as a cheaper gun. So,
okay, Matt.
So yeah, I'm focused more on getting a rifle for just being able to go to. We have wide open land where I live. Bureau of Land Management. I think I've discussed it in
Matt,
previous.
Are you looking at an assault? Are you looking at an assault rifle?
Let's see here.
Matt is not looking at an assault rifle because you cannot legally buy an assault rifle in the United States unless you have a Class 1 federal firearms license.
My bad. I forgot.
There's a fallacy that we need to talk about at some stage, but we'll go over that for now.
So what I'm looking at a few different options. Let's see here. I believe it is called the M1A. I'm also looking at the M1 Grand.
Yeah.
And of course, there's other cheaper options to shoot as along with that to go in line with something in a .22 caliber rimfire. Just to get used to it, because honestly, I have a deep respect for the damage and the power of a firearm on the level of I actually get very nervous handling a firearm. So
as well, you should.
Yeah, and I've been through military style marksman training when I was in ROTC. Went to the range, and I did very well at the range. But that being said, following the rules of the range and everything, it's a lot to think about. And being that I think a lot, I think about that stuff constantly when I'm on a range-like setting. So it's one of those things where I want to respect the firearm.
I've seen you shoot. You don't really get nervous like some people do. You are cautious. There's a difference between nervous and cautious. And I think really what you're trying to say is you're cautious.
Well, it's an extra energy that builds up in me, and I feel it in my muscles and whatnot. I tense up. When I go shooting, I am safe, and that caution is fueled by my nerves.
Yeah, but you don't get anxiety over it like some people do.
No.
So that's a huge note. Like some people take nervousness, and that's the anxiety that captures them rather than the nerves. And you're more caution. There are guns around me, nerves, and you're like, I'm holding a gun, I'm responsible, nerves. And that, I wouldn't call that. Is Phil frozen?
No, he's looking at his phone.
I'm texting our mother.
And honestly, I get the same feeling driving in a populated area. So
yeah, it's more caution than nerves.
And it's a popular area that you're not used to.
Yeah. Well, driving through Tucson, it's 1 million people. My heart rate goes up, my blood pressure. I go to the doctor's office and they go, wow, your blood pressure is through the roof. You know what? Give me 15 minutes and check again.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, look, you're in the norm. Oh, crazy.
Hey, so with that being said, Phil, what about you?
My turn.
Yeah.
I am I'm an avid supporter of the Second Amendment, and part of that is because I live in the state of South Dakota, where police response times can be pretty darn slow, not because of any inefficiencies in law enforcement or any problems in law enforcement, but because we are a very rural state.
Well, and we grew up in a town that didn't have a police force.
Right. There was
shared it.
The closest law enforcement to where we grew up in Midland, South Dakota, was Phillip, and that was 30 miles away at an average or a mean. So if something happens, you got to be able to defend yourself out here. But that being said, even in cities and things like that, sometimes you need something immediate, and the police cannot be there immediately. Cannot. It takes some time, unless you get lucky and they happen to be there when it happens. But criminals tend to not do criminal things when police are right there, So I think the Second Amendment is a very important thing for us for many different reasons, and I don't want to get into all that here. The last gun I acquired, I don't want to talk about how I acquired it because I just don't feel like I have to.
Doesn't matter.
But the gun buying process can be somewhat sticky sometimes. It can be a little bit difficult because there are so many federal regulations in how you do that. And certain classes of individuals in this country do not have the right to own or possess firearms. Those people are, by and large, felons, people who have committed felony level offenses. And so the federal government mandates a background check anytime somebody buys a firearm at a store. There's some other requirements too. This is in no means legal advice for anybody watching this. But there are some hoops you got to jump through to buy a gun. And to be perfectly honest, I'm okay with some of those hoops. But I don't think any more hoops should be imposed.
Yeah.
There's some discussion about classes and things like that. I think everybody who owns a firearm, if you don't have experience with a firearm or experience in shooting, then you should take a class to understand how to operate a firearm safely and to become a better shooter. Because frankly, being proficient in the use of your firearm and being able to put lead on target is vitally important in situations. But I do not think that should be a requirement for the purchase of a firearm. These red flag laws that we've heard about, well, we haven't heard about them for a few months, thanks to COVID. But red flag laws, in my opinion, are a horrible idea because that gives the government, and I'm using that term as the generic, the government, the right to come in and take your firearms basically for any reason. Joe Bob down the street doesn't like the way you looked at him the other day. He calls and makes a complaint. Next thing you know, the police are knocking on your door saying you got to hand out all your firearms. And and the reason Joe Bob didn't like the way you looked at him the other day is because you tried to buy something from him. You had a contract and he balked and changed his mind and decided he didn't want to sell it to you. Stupid things like that should have absolutely no bearing on whether a person has a firearm or not. That's the potential problem with red flag laws. So this is another soapbox that I could get on, and I'm not going to. Suffice to say, Ben, you're looking at 9 millimeters. 9 millimeters are puny and wimpy, and you should be buying 45 ACP. Matt is looking at good guns, and he should definitely purchase one of each.
Do you have a 45 ACP or a 40 cal that is going to fall in my price range?
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Well,
you're stuck.
You know what? A 9 mil. Well, stop.
Go ahead. A 9 mil with proper ammunition is a perfectly legitimate firearm unless they're wearing body armor.
And if they're wearing body armor, aim small, miss small.
Aim small, miss small. That's right. I tend to be the larger the caliber, the better. Mm-hmm. I tend to believe that you should purchase the largest caliber you can afford and that you can handle.
You can afford
a 50 cal Desert Eagle.
Matt, do you think you could handle a 50 cal Desert Eagle right now?
Not right now.
In my current state, no. In my normal state, when I'm not going through treatment,
no, I don't think you could.
And hence why I'm getting the 9 mil.
Let me put it this way, folks. I purchased my my 45 ACP, goodness, when I was in law school, so it would be about 14, 15 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And it took me probably 10 years to get really proficient with it because, as I describe it, usually it's a hand cannon. It's not a 1911 like most, that's traditional. If you think of 45, you think of a 1911. John Browning's famous handgun design, which is a completely metal firearm, really solid. I bought a polymer-based 45 ACP, and frankly, and it's a double stack too, which means that you have the rounds stacked side by side, kind of like this in the magazine, which makes the magazine wider. And I don't have massively huge hands, and it was a little bit too much for me. I should have gone something smaller. I should have gone 40 or 10 or maybe even 9 millimeter. But I've become proficient with it, and I'm very happy with it now. So that's my theory: is you should buy the biggest caliber you can afford and you can utilize safely and effectively. That's why I encourage Matt to go ahead and buy both an M1 Garand and an M1A. Yeah, 6 on the M1 Garand and 308 on the M1A.
Yeah, I can't afford either one technically. Well, the M1 Grand right now, if I get a field grade M1 Grand, which is currently what they have in stock, it's about $650 plus all the work that I would have to do to join
And
the club.
that's right. That's from the civilian marksmanship program.
Yes,
Which,
CMP.
yeah, I'm very disappointed there aren't CMP clubs in Pierce, South Dakota. I don't understand that. Because I got to tell you, if there were, I would be finding $650 real quick, because I would love to own a Garand. I fired a Garand once, and it's just an amazing firearm. Amazing firearm. The M1A modified M1 Garand, chambered in a different caliber, uses a box magazine. The one thing you got to know about M1 Garands is I guess they don't really like modern 30-06 ammunition. You kind of got to be a little picky. There are companies that make Garand specific 30-06 ammunition, and of course, any of the military stuff that you get, it'll work just fine with. And I don't know the exact problem, but be careful of that if you choose to get an M1 Garand. Think about the ammunition you're using. That's about all I've got on purchasing firearms. The more, the better.
So do we start discussing the points that we disagree on, or have we talked long enough?
Well, Matt, what? Well, I think we can cut something out, like Phil talking. Matt,
ladies and gentlemen, this is what I put up with.
Matt is a big believer that everyone needs classes before purchasing a gun, and he made that very clear earlier. I'm a big believer.
And I want to say, I think people should take classes before purchasing a gun.
I think everybody should have hunter safety.
I don't agree with what Matt's about to say.
Right.
So, what I've heard from Ben and what Illinois requires is that they require 5 classes. Are those 5 different days?
What? I never said that. No. Illinois requires a card that you have to order, and it's like $20. I have it. It's somewhere in here. It's this one right here. It's called a FOID, a firearm owner's identification card.
Yeah, that way when they decide to take away your weapons, they know exactly who to go to, what address to go to, and
yeah. Exactly.
So what Ben's saying is that the state of Illinois doesn't believe in the Second Amendment. They believe they have to regulate and maintain a list of who gets to purchase, and they have to give permission for Ben to use the Second Amendment. That may be an unpopular opinion with some of my more liberal friends. I'm sorry, but that's my reading of the Second Amendment.
But from my understanding, you don't have to take a class to own a gun.
Okay, and it does.
Do you have to take a class to get that card?
No. You just have to pass a background check.
It does annoy me that they did not take lessons and recognize the road that they're on. What was it? Germany required back in the 20s or 30s. They required everyone to register their guns, and then when a certain party came to power in Germany, they went and acquired all those weapons from those people because they were all registered. That was my understanding of history. Maybe I'm wrong.
I've never looked into it, to be perfectly honest, so I can't verify or deny.
Yeah,
but I know it's a possibility and something that I don't like the idea of.
So, I mean, it definitely facilitates the government in being able to easily identify those that own weapons and track them down and take them. I don't agree with having a card. However, I do think that in order to further empower gun owners to properly use their weapons, that they need to be able to be taught. And, if they fail to pass a gun class, they need to go and learn proper usage of a weapon before they go and buy it. It's more for safe storage and safe implementation of the firearm that we were blessed enough to know and to have that experience, which means that I have no problem going and spending the money to prove that, yes, I do, in fact, know how to use a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Let me throw a hypothetical out here, because I'm a lawyer and that's what I do.
Yep.
What about let's say you're in the state of Illinois, And Illinois has a requirement that you have to have a class in order to pass this, in order to buy a firearm, as you postulated. And let's say that the person in charge of all of that at the government, at the state level, has been appointed by somebody who is anti-firearms and has basically issued a directive that says nobody's going to pass this class.
Okay. So Minnesota actually had a requirement for classes in order to buy, is it handguns?
Yep.
And the sheriff, so in each county, the sheriff ultimately, approves or disapproves someone buying. And the county I lived in, I actually talked to the sheriff, the active sheriff at the time, and he said he just approves everyone that comes across his desk.
Okay, that's great in that county. But what about Hennepin County?
Well, one, you shouldn't live in Hennepin County. There are too many people that live in that county.
I agree completely, for the record. But what I'm saying is that these things, there are regulations like this in place in East Coast states, and they're not about classes. They're about, do you get the permit, and you have to have the permit to buy the gun. Yeah. And there are people, there was a case that came across the United States Supreme Court's desk this year that the United States Supreme Court declined to take, where an ATM technician who works on ATMs in very dangerous inner city type areas applied to get a weapon for his own personal protection while he's in these areas, and the government denied him the ability to do that.
That's unfortunate.
Because they don't like guns. They had no good reason, and the law there doesn't require a good reason for them to deny it. It's absolutely subjective, and that's the sort of thing that I don't like about a requirement that you take a class, because the teacher will be subjective. They're going to appoint teachers that you don't. And look, I work for the government. Okay, I get it. My state, I don't think that would ever happen.
So,
but it does. It is something you've got to worry about. Not the administration you have now or the government you have now. You have to worry about the government you have in the future. What is somebody else going to do?
Now, I'm a big fan of saying that the classes need to be conducted by trained professionals that are not employed by the government, and that training and that certification process be handled in a free market society. Now, the thing is that by doing that, there's also corruption on the other side, where the people will go and say, listen, if you take my course, I can guarantee that you're going to be approved and you're going to be able to, that's going too far.
Yep.
We need to have checks and balances that, one, protects our right, but also helps ensure the safe utilization and ownership of firearms.
I think.
Good luck with that.
I think here's
it's an impossible task.
I think here's the issue. We were all taught hunter safety by the same guy.
Yep.
We were. We all took the hunter safety class offered by this one. It was the South Dakota State hunter safety class required of those under a certain age to take before you get a hunting license.
We all took it at around the age 11 or 12, right?
No, I would have been 14 or 15 when I took it, because we didn't move there until I was 14.
Right. So when I was 12, I took it, right? We took it. I think hunter safety should be highly recommended before you buy any firearm. Why? Because I think that is one of the best, I said highly recommended. That is one of the best classes you can take. One, it's going to teach you hunter safety. So it's going to teach you holding a gun while you're around others and holding a gun while you're by yourself. And that's huge. I think that's the first class anybody should take when pertaining to guns, because when you're buying a gun, it should be a tool, not a weapon.
So the one thing I would say that the hunter safety course that we took did not have a live fire aspect to it, and evidently there are courses that have live fire, and I would say that is the correct level of and that's the correct course to take.
We just weren't allowed to because it was within city limits.
Well, and it was at the school, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let's blow some liberal minds. We took our hunter safety class at a school, at a public school.
Let's blow some more liberal minds. We used to have friends who traveled to school, and in their pickups, they had a gun rack, and their guns were on display during the school.
Yep. In the school parking lot.
That ended as soon as Columbine happened.
No, it still happened in school.
No, they were told from then on to take them down out of the racks and store them behind the seat.
Well, I
Put it into the seat, guys.
well, we grew up in such a rural area that people would go hunting before or after school, and they would have
we had we had people who drove in 45 miles for school,
yeah.
and most of that on country roads. And frankly, if they saw a coyote, because coyotes are predators that attack livestock, if they saw a coyote, they were going to stop and shoot the coyote.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right.
So
anyway,
we've stated our positions.
Yeah.
Oh, you still have more to say?
No, we're done.
Oh, that's good. That's good because I don't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah,
anyway,
I know.
Anyway, just follow the law and be good. So
yeah, please do. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Happy 4th of July, everybody. I guess we normally talk about drinks. We're recording this it's 11:50 now. We started earlier. Drinking coffee this morning. I think Ben's drinking coffee, and I think Matt's drinking water.
Yep, water.
So nothing real spectacular today, but
yeah,
we love you guys. Fun. Happy 4th of July. And if we've offended you, I'm sorry. If we've made you laugh, I'm not sorry.
If offended,
we've done both.
If you're offended, grow some thicker skin. We didn't say anything that should offend you. It's our opinion, not yours.
Yep.
So. Yeah, this is totally our opinion, and I know that I'm definitely on the left-hand side of the right side of gun ownership.
Anyway, have a great rest of your day. Happy 4th. Love you guys.
Love you guys. Bye-bye.
Take care.